Managing site quotas. Site quota templates set limits on storage for a site collection. So that it doesn't get out of hand, you will want to set some specific limits regarding that. A quota specifies storage limit values for the maximum amount of data that can be stored in a site collection. It also specifies the storage size that, when reached, triggers an email alert to the site collection administrator. For instance, a SharePoint server site quota for a personal site template would be possibly to alert at 50 megabytes with a lock at 100 megabytes. Keep in mind, if you have 1,000 users and each of them creates a personal site, that's a gigabyte worth of data. There is also what is referred to as sandbox solution quotas. Those are for solutions that are added into a site collection. And because they're not farm-wide, they're specific to that site collection, there are some limitations that are placed on those. And that's going to keep it from consuming too many resources for that site collection. Once it reaches a specified amount based on a point system, different resources or different points, it will lock those resources, whether it be a web part or a feature that's been enabled in that site collection, so that it won't continue to absorb everything. And keep in mind that it's limited for just that day. Once that lock is applied, if you've reached your points that are allowed for that sandbox solution quota, it's just going to lock it for the day, and then the following day when the timer service clears it, it'll be available for use again. By default, a quota contains 300 points for the sandbox solutions. A point is relative measurement of resource usage. For example, CPU cycles, memory, or page faults. Points enable comparisons between measurements of resource usage that could not be compared otherwise. For example, it takes millions of CPU cycles to make up 1 point. But each time a sandbox solution stops working, it's counted as 1 point. And once it gets to its maximum, it's going to lock all solutions that are deployed specifically to that site collection for the day. By default, a sandbox solution quota contains 300 points. A point is relative measurement of resource usage. For example, CPU cycles, memory, or page faults. Points enable comparisons between measurements of resource usage that could not be compared otherwise. For example, it takes millions of CPU cycles to make up 1 point. But each time a sandbox solution stops working, it's counted as 1 point. Quotas are particularly useful when using Microsoft SharePoint in an enterprise environment, such as a company-wide intranet or an internet service provider. You should use quotas in these environments to ensure that one site collection cannot use so many resources that other site collections can no longer function. You can assign a quota template to a site collection when you create the site collection, or you can assign a quota template at a later time. And it can be reversed or increased at any time. You will want to take some time to create a default quota and some different quota templates based on your company's needs. Apply individual quotas manually. You can apply them manually to site collections, or you can apply it at the web application level, so any new site collections that are created within that web application automatically have that quota applied to them. Create a default quota to apply automatically. What this means is if you apply a quota to a web application, any new site collections created within that web application will have that quota applied without any user intervention. This makes it easier so you have consistency across the board. But do keep in mind, even though it is applied automatically, at any time you can go back to that site collection and make changes, and it'll only affect that particular site collection. Another thing you're going to want to configure before you roll out SharePoint are site collection locks. There are times that you're going to need to lock a site collection, or you may want to make it read access. It could be that you don't want users to go in and make changes to it. You don't want content added to it. So you have some different options as to how this can be applied, and it is per site collection. Locks restrict the site collection as to what functions can be performed, if any. The first option is not locked. The site collection is unlocked and it's available to users. Read only prevents users from adding new content to the site collection updates and deletions are still allowed. Prevent adding content, just what it says. Prevent users from adding and updating and deleting any content. And this is specific to the content only. And no access. We use this quite a bit. One of the things that we do is if we're removing a site collection or if we're bringing it from a test farm to a production farm, instead of just removing it from the test farm, we would lock it, because 9 times out of 10 users are going to come back and say, I need to access this site for whatever reason, just to validate information and so on. So we'll keep it locked for a certain amount of time, and then we'll remediate and eventually remove it from the farm. Okay, so now let's go take a peek at our quotas and locks that are available. To do that, we're going to click on Application Management because it has to do with the web application and site collection. Let's take a peek at any templates that might be available to us. So we're going to click Quota, Specify Quota Templates, and you'll see that we don't have any that are available. Click Cancel. Go ahead and click Configure Quotas and Locks. Make sure that you're at the correct site collection, always key. And you can see that there are no quotas applied. I could manually come in here and apply a quota, which we're going to do here in a minute. I'm just going to take a peek around so we can get a feel for what's out there. So we have no templates, and there are no templates currently applied to the site collection. So let's go create a quota. Create a new quota template. We're going to start from a blank one. We're going to call this Standard Site Collection Quota. We'll probably create another one here in just a minute that's going to be for my sites or personal sites that'll have a different quota applied to those sites when they're created. We want to limit the storage to a maximum of 100 gig. And then we do definitely want to have a warning email sent to the site collection administrator, letting them know that this is starting to max out. What happens when a quota is met is the site continues to function as it should be, but if anybody tries to add, or if any of your users try to add content to that site, it's not going to allow them. So we're going to set this for, we'll go with 80 gig. And that's going to start giving us an idea that we need to start keeping an eye on this and either clean out, archive old content in sites, or increase the amount of storage available to it. And the default that they recommend for sandbox solutions, so if your site collection administrators or users add any solutions into the site, you don't want it to utilize all of the resources and cause problems in other site collections. So we're going to limit that to 300. And to send a warning email when that reaches 250. And then click OK. So we've just created our first site collection template. Let's create another one. And this time we're going to create a new quota template. We're going to call this Personal, for personal sites. This one is for my sites that will be created by the users, and every user within your organization will have an option to create a My Site if you enable My Sites. Remember, if you have 1,000 users, that's quite a bit of content. So you want to limit that so it doesn't get out of hand. We're going to limit it to 100 meg, and the reason it is you really don't want them to use this as their storage repository. The only thing they should be keeping in there, or maybe their PTO requests, stuff that's personal specific to them. Everything else should have a location out on a team site or a department site where it would go. And the warning will happen at 85 meg. Again, with the sandbox solutions and code limits, we'll put that down to 300, and to send a warning email at 250. Click OK. Now that we have our templates created, we need to apply them to the different site collections and web applications. Right now they're there, but nothing's being utilized. It's not being consumed by any other components. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to apply it to the web application that we create, or that we created. There's one for employee sites. So we're going to highlight that and go up to General Settings. Notice default quota template has not been applied. We're going to select the down arrow, and you can see we have personal and standard site collection quota available. We're going to click on standard site collection quota, and then we'll scroll down to the bottom. These are some other settings that we're not going to go into at this point. We're just going to focus on the quotas, and then tell it OK. So now we've applied it to that web application. You would think that it would be applied to existing site collections, but that's not the case. Let's go look at the site collections we have available and what quotas are applied to them. Configure quotas and locks. Always make sure you're in the right site collection. Remember that web applications can have thousands of site collections associated with them. So you would scroll down to identify and select the site collection you want to apply this quota to, or to verify what quota is currently applied, and tell it OK. Notice it did not pick it up. Even though we applied it at the web application level, it will not automatically apply it to everything that already exists. That is only going to apply it to new site collections that are created. We're going to click the down arrow for site quota information and choose standard site collection quota. And notice by doing that, it automatically fills in the text boxes appropriately based on what that template is set for. And what's really nice, if you need to go look and see how many points they've utilized during the day, you can come in and it'll tell you for today what their usage is. And it'll give you the average usage for the last 14 days. This is really great from a developer standpoint. So now that we've created a template, we've applied it to the web application, we've applied it to an individual site collection that already exists, let's create a site collection and ensure that it's going to apply it as it's created. So we're going to click Create Site Collection. Make sure we're in the correct web application. By clicking the down arrow, choose Change Web Application. We only have one, makes it a little bit easier. Click Employee Sites, and then Title. Because something is already at the root, it's not going to give us an option to change that. And the only managed path available, we can certainly add more, is sites. So we'll utilize that. We'll create a team site. We have to add our primary, and we'll add a secondary. And notice it automatically selects standard site collection quota for you. It's never set in stone you have to use this quota. I could at this point choose another one, but it'll automatically apply this one if I don't select a different one. Tell it OK. Go ahead and tell it OK. OK. So now that we've applied it, let's go take a peek. Configure quotas and locks. Notice that the current site collection quota is applied. And again, at any time, if this isn't meeting the needs, if I need to expand it, I can choose individual quota and go in and modify this to whatever is needed. And tell it OK. Now, we've configured the site collection quotas. Now let's go take a peek at the locks. We're going back into the same location that we were in for quotas. Again, always confirm you're in the right site collection. This is a demo, so we only have 1 or 2 site collections, but you will want to make sure that you choose the correct one. For instance, we no longer need this sites test. Go ahead and tell it OK, but we're not ready to delete it just yet. They've created another site somewhere else. They've made modifications, a whole new look and feel, and created it from scratch. So we don't want to delete this one completely for at least 2 to 3 weeks, because they will most likely be coming back for content or something that they've missed. And it's not very complicated. Your options are lock the status of the site for not locked, adding content prevented, read only, and no access. If you put in no access, it's going to ask for a specific explanation. Go ahead and tell it OK. And then what's going to happen about 2 or 3 days from now, somebody's going to say, oh, we forgot to bring this content over, or oh, we need to validate how this was working over here because it's not working correctly over here. So you would just come back in to configure quotas and locks, simply click not locked, and you're good to go. But before we do that, let's take it a step further. Let's go to that site collection. If I come in here, let me back out so you can see what I'm doing. If I click View All Site Collections, make sure I'm at the right web application, select the site collection that you want to look at. I'm coming in here just so I can copy the URL, but it would list all the different site collections that are available for this web application. And notice that we cannot access the site. But before we do that, notice something here. Notice when I put this up here, it didn't append the rest of the information. There should be a default, there should be an ASPX page associated with that. That does happen occasionally where it doesn't append all of the information that it should. So if you come to Home, you can see what it is it needs to append. Site pages, and then Home ASPX. So I'm going to copy that and then come back over here and paste it. And we still don't get the site available because we've blocked it, but I just wanted to point out that it hadn't appended, and we should get a different error message, but it hasn't appended the correct information behind it. So let's take a look at that while we're here. Let's make sure that it is locked. No access. Let's unlock it and see if it'll let us access it now. There we go. Now that we've unlocked it, see how quickly it is that you can open it right back up. It doesn't take, you don't have to do an IS reset. Just click the button, not locked, tell it OK, and they'll be able to get in, pull out their information. Make sure you get a time frame, how much time they need, or it could be open for a while, and then people get confused as to where they need to be. They may be adding content to this site without realizing they're in the wrong location. So let's go ahead and set this back to no access. And tell it OK. And then we'll go back, refresh the page, and now it says 403 forbidden. These are some of the things you will need to identify before you go live, and set the quotas and so on, so everything will be consistent and ready to go as soon as you open the doors for the users to start consuming.